Welcome to World History with Mr. Giese. In this episode, we will continue discussing the background of conditions in Europe, but more specifically, Catholicism. We will be discussing the changes in the Catholic Church at this time, how Martin Luther challenged the Church, what is Protestantism and how did it spread, and what were the effects of the Reformation in England. Before we get started, I need to be specific in discussing the nature of this video. It's not a combination of religious practices. This is simply a background of the Protestant Reformation during and after the 1500s. So let's get started. Leading up to the 1500s, the Catholic Church gained wealth and power in Europe. With this power came instances of financial corruption, abuse of power, and immorality. The Church, because of the artwork that was being created and displayed during the Renaissance, began to finance artists to create projects for them. The cost of these projects was covered by taxing the middle class and the peasants. For example, in the early 1500s, to pay for the construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the Pope approved the sale of indulgences. These were pardons issued by the Pope to lessen the amount of time a person's soul spends in purgatory. Catholics believed that purgatory was where a person's soul went to work off the sins that they had committed. This was one of the Church's most criticized practices because people believed this should be done with faith alone and not money. This would become a big issue with some looking to change the Church. One of those people was Martin Luther. He was a monk that, through his stand against the Church's use of indulgences, is credited for starting the Protestant Reformation in 1517. He wrote the 95 Theses, which outlined his grievances with the Church and flatly denied the indulgences had any power to eliminate sin. He also criticized the power and wealth of the Church. He nailed this on the door of the Church, which was used at the time as a community bulletin board in Latin. He wrote them in Latin because they were intended for church leaders. This, as he intended, started a discussion with university intellectuals, and with the help of the printing press, Luther's ideas were published and spread throughout Europe. As these ideas were read, a desire for reforming the Church grew. We will discuss in more detail some of Luther's specific ideas and arguments in class. In 1520, after the publication of Luther's works, the Pope excommunicated him, or expelled him from the Church. When he appeared before the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, he did not change his opinions. When Charles V handed down the Edict of Worms, it declared Luther an outlaw and condemned his writings. His ideas continued to spread across Europe, and although he never intended on it, a new religion began, Lutheranism. Martin Luther wasn't the only reformer. We will discuss other reformers like John Calvin in class. As Protestantism spread across Europe, it made its way to England when the King, Henry VIII, first wrote about Luther and his unpopular ideas regarding Catholicism. However, after his wife was unable to provide him a male heir to the throne, Henry VIII decided to have his marriage annulled, or declared invalid based on church laws. When the Pope did not agree to it, he in Parliament, which is referred to as the Reformation Parliament, declared that England was no longer under the authority of the Pope. Henry would become the head of the Church of England. Not much was changed in the church rituals, but England had officially broken free of the Holy Roman Empire. Henry's heirs over the course of about 20 years would switch between the Catholic Church and the Church of England, which is Protestant. After discussing Martin Luther and the other reformers in class, in the next video we will discuss the impact the Protestant Reformation had on the Church and the series of reforms that they put into place, otherwise known as the Counter-Reformation.